Hello, I'm David Williams, the editor of Body Language, and I have with me Mr. Geoff Bond, a nutritional anthropologist.
Well, let me just first of all explain just what a nutritional anthropologist is, because I'm sure most of your readers or listeners haven't heard about that. What we do, we study the origins of the human species, the kind of lifestyle to which we're naturally adapted, and the understanding that we're still living in bodies that were designed for that particular time, and that the mismatch between what nature intended for us and the way we live today is at the origin of so many of the sicknesses that we have today. The big diseases like cancer and heart disease and osteoporosis and diabetes and so on and so forth are really diseases of civilization due to the fact that we're not living the way that our biology expects it to be.
How is our life different from our ancestors?
Well, when we look back to our origins, and I'm talking now going back 60,000 years at least, because we now know that everybody on this planet is descended from a small group of people who lived just 3,000 generations ago on the savannas of East Africa. We now know that we're living in bodies designed for that time there. And this is the big breakthrough that we got just in recent years. It's why it's fairly new that we're still living in bodies and digestive systems with mentalities and with biochemistries that are designed for that time. And the interesting thing is that now is that we can piece together what that lifestyle was like, what the kinds of plants they were eating, the kinds of animals they were eating, and the kind of profile, the nutritional profile that they had. And we can now do the same thing in today's world so that people can go out into the supermarket jungle and learn how to choose wisely and eat in a way which is in a way that our bodies recognize.
So what would you say the 5 key factors are, maybe you have more or fewer, that people should follow today that our ancestors did without thinking about it?
Yes, what I would say is this, that our ancestors migrated out of Africa 60,000 years ago. Eventually they filled up the whole world. And they were fighting each other for living space. But they were still living a kind of forager existence. And the real damage started when one of these groups learned to live not on 200 square miles, which was what they were needed normally, but on 2 square miles. And what they did was take control of their food supply. They started to plant their food. They invented farming. And once that happened, something new happened. First of all, we reduced right down the wide range of food species that people were eating, right down to just 3 or 4, and they introduced a totally new food group, ones that they would not normally have been eating, but one that was possible to grow, to harvest, to protect against predators, and which would keep them alive through the winter. And it was that time that, for the first time in the history of the human species, people began to eat birdseed, which is my way of, rather provocative way of saying they were eating grains. So this is the big controversial piece of news, that human beings are not designed to eat grains. That is to say, wheat, barley, rice, and all the other things that we think of as being cereals. And the problem with grains is that they're starchy, and starch is nothing other than sugar in another form. And a slice of toast hits the bloodstream just as fast as a teaspoonful of sugar. We're off on sharp blood sugar spikes, which in turn creates sharp insulin spikes, and this upsets a whole lot of other hormonal activities, which are factors in all the sorts of diseases of modern civilization.
What food should we be eating today?
Well, this is a very open question, but let me just round it up for you. When we talk about how we try and emulate the ancient way in today's world, it's actually quite simple. What we say is, look, we should be eating quite a lot of raw plant food. That's the way our ancient ancestors did it, and that raw plant food, not cooked, does preserve various kinds of nutrients in ways that are important for us. So that's easily done. You just eat big salads. The thing we call a salad, you have one of those big ones every day, that does the job. If we're talking about and other kinds of vegetation, fine, anything that isn't a potato or isn't certainly isn't grains, but and isn't other kinds of glycemic foods. That's not always a problem. So we tend to be a little easy on carrots and on sweet potato and on peas, for example. They're not particularly great for human beings.
What about tomatoes?
But tomatoes, green beans, broccoli, all these sorts of things, they're fine. The things we call proper veg, if you like, yes, they're fine. And then if we're talking about animal matter, well, yes, eggs any style, but you want the omega-3 rich ones, preferably farmyard. If you find a real farmyard chickens, then they are pecking up the insects, they're eating purslane, they're eating all sorts of goodies. They have a fatty acid profile in their eggs, which is as nature intended and which is how it's right for us. Seafood of almost any kind, preferably the oily fish. Fat's fine too. Most kinds of poultry, except for, well, you don't want the battery chickens because they have a terrible fatty acid profile, but anything that is anything like a duck or a goose, turkey too, and game birds, the pheasants, the partridges, they're good. And sure, if you can get the exotic wild meats, the venison, the alligator, the crocodile, not the albatross, but the ostrich, these kind of creatures, they're okay too. And today, we're living in a totally different kind of world, of course, and in particular, some of the things that we do are provoking or triggering stress reactions that were only designed or expected to work or come into play once a month. They're now coming into play 10 times a day. We worry about our mortgages, we worry about our jobs, we're worrying about so many kinds of things that the foragers didn't have to worry about. We don't particularly have to worry about whether a lion is actually going to come and jump on us in a second or two, but that was a rare thing for them. But for us, we're having to dodge motor cars. We're just having to be so careful the whole time. So we're living a stressed out life, leading a life which is triggering these stress reactions. And so, of course, stress is with its secretions of stress hormones like cortisol and so on, are also undermining many aspects of our health. Now, when you understand the kinds of things that are going on today, you can perhaps start to make little decisions about what are better ways of handling your life such that you don't actually make these triggers happening.
Thank you very much, Geoff.
Right, thank you very much, David.